When the F6F Hellcat first appeared in the skies over the Pacific, Japan didn't just see another enemy fighter. They saw something they couldn't quite understand. It looked bulky, almost inelegant compared to the refined curves of their beloved Zero. Some pilots even laughed at it. They thought America had built a flying tank. Too heavy, too slow, too late to matter. But in a matter of months, that laughter turned to disbelief and then to fear. Because the Hellcat didn't just challenge Japan's air supremacy, that it crushed it. In 1942, Japan ruled the skies. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was a marvel, agile, light, with unmatched range. It could outturn anything the Allies threw at it. The early battles of the Pacific proved it. Wake Island, the Philippines, the Coral Sea. The Zero was the perfect predator for a war that demanded reach and maneuverability. And for a time, it seemed unstoppable. But in the shadows of American factories, engineers were quietly rewriting the rules of aerial combat. The lessons came from defeat, the painful kind. Every time a Wildcat fell to a Zero, American analysts gathered data, not excuses. They studied salvaged wrecks, interviewed pilots, dissected dogfights frame by frame. What they learned was simple but devastating. They would never outturn the Zero, so instead, they would build something that didn't need to. The result was the F6F Hellcat. From its very first flight, it was clear this wasn't evolution, it was revolution. The Hellcat was heavier, yes, but that weight was its strength. Beneath its thick skin of metal lay self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plating, and a power plant that would change everything. The Pratt Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp, a 2,000 horsepower masterpiece that transformed air combat from a ballet into a brawl. To the Japanese, this was shocking. Their entire philosophy of air combat had been built on agility, precision, and minimal weight. But the Hellcat didn't play by those rules. It didn't need to pirouette through the sky. It simply overpowered its opponent. Its dives were faster, its climbs relentless, its firepower brutal. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns that could tear through aluminium like paper. The first time Japanese pilots met the Hellcat in combat, they didn't know what they were facing. At high altitude, they expected to pull away, but the Hellcat stayed on their tail. In a dive, they thought they could outpace it, but the Hellcat plunged faster, and when they hit it, it didn't explode. It kept flying. By the summer of 1943, word began spreading among the Zero units. This new American plane doesn't die. Imperial Navy intelligence initially dismissed the reports. They believed the Hellcat was simply a modified Wildcat, a minor step forward. It wasn't until captured wreckage was analyzed that they realized the truth. America had leapfrogged them entirely. The most astonishing part wasn't just the Hellcat's performance. It was how quickly it had appeared. Designed, tested, and deployed in record time, it symbolized the industrial might of a nation that could outthink and outbuild its enemy simultaneously. The numbers are staggering. In less than 2 years, Grumman produced over 12,000 Hellcats, more aircraft than Japan could build of all types, combined in the same period. And each one carried the lessons of every air battle that had come before it. On paper, the F-6F's top speed of around 380 miles per hour didn't seem extraordinary. But it wasn't about the numbers, it was about control. It could climb nearly as fast as a Zero, dive faster, and sustain punishment the Zero could never survive. The Japanese fighter's lightweight design once its greatest strength, had become its fatal weakness. A single bullet through a Zero's fuel tank could ignite it instantly. The Hellcat's self-sealing tanks often brought pilots home even after taking dozens of hits. American pilots began joking that they could fly through a thunderstorm of bullets and still land. For Japanese airmen, that resilience was demoralizing. They were fighting opponents who refused to die. Tactically, the Americans adapted too. The old dogfighting tactics, turning fights, close-range duels, were replaced by boom and zoom, dive fast, fire accurately, climb out. It was the perfect way to use the Hellcat's strengths. The Japanese tried to lure them into turning fights, but the Hellcats simply refused. Instead, they struck from above and disappeared. The tide had turned. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944 sealed the Hellcat's legend. Over 300 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in a single day, in what became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Most of those kills were made by Hellcats. In just one battle, Japan lost a generation of trained pilots, and with them the last real hope of regaining air superiority. Behind those victories was not just superior engineering, but superior logistics. The Hellcat's design made it easy to build, easy to repair, and forgiving to fly. Pilots could transition into it quickly, and ground crews could patch it up in hours. Japan, by contrast, was struggling with shortages of fuel, spare parts, and even experienced pilots. The Hellcat was more than a fighter. It was a symbol of industrial warfare perfected. What Japanese engineers admired most, once they had time to study captured examples after the war, was how balanced it was. Not the fastest, not the most agile, but the most complete. It didn't rely on one advantage, it blended them all into a package that worked in the real world of combat, fatigue, and chaos. To the men who fought against it, the Hellcat was a revelation of what the Allies had become: methodical, relentless, and impossibly efficient. Japan's aviation industry, which had once led in innovation, could no longer compete. They had underestimated not only American industry, but American adaptability. By the time Japan understood the scale of the shift, the war was already lost. The Hellcat had ruled the skies, ensuring American bombers reached their targets, protecting fleets across the Pacific, and dismantling the myth of Japanese air invincibility piece by piece. In the years that followed, Japanese engineers would quietly admit something remarkable: that the Hellcat was in many ways the perfect response to the Zero, its natural predator. It was everything the Zero wasn't: armored, durable, brutally efficient. So what did Japan really think of the Hellcat? Initially, they dismissed it. Then they feared it. And finally, they respected it. Because the Hellcat didn't just defeat their planes, it defeated their entire philosophy of air combat. In the end, the F6F Hellcat wasn't just America's Zero killer. It was the turning point that marked the end of one era of aviation and the beginning of another. It proved that in war, the deadliest weapon isn't just firepower or speed. It's the ability to learn faster than your enemy. And when that lesson roared through the Pacific skies, it came with 6 Brownings blazing from the wings of the Hellcat.